Well, everyone, the iPhone 6s Plus is without a doubt one of the more interesting iPhones Apple has ever made. Although I probably wouldn't recommend any single individual person to buy and or use this iPhone anymore, I still think it was a very important iPhone when it first came out. It still has a lot of capability and a lot of quality, and if you're in the market, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, it's an old iPhone, maybe I can buy it and use it. I would say there's probably some other older iPhones I'd recommend buying before this thing, and although this thing is probably worth like less than $100 nowadays, I will tell you there's still some things about this iPhone that hold up very well today, but for the most part, I would recommend buying an iPhone that's still supported with software that's either on iOS 17 or above, like the iPhone XR or newer. So keep that in mind. If you want to pick up some iPhones, I would recommend buying this year though. Links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPhone 6s Plus, on the front, you can see it definitely has that little bit of an older design to it. It has that 5.5-inch Retina IPS panel, and to be honest, when this phone first came out, it really didn't even have that bad of a panel. You know, it still looks pretty good. I think with these types of devices, they hold up fairly well over time. They're definitely not perfect or anything, but they definitely, they're not bad panels either. The thing with these, type of phones, you're getting a very big bezel on the top and the bottom with that, home button. That can be a very archaic, design for a ton of people. And for the average person, you probably just don't want to buy a phone out there that's already going to have this type of design because it's going to be very, very outdated. So that's what I would say, like if you're buying a phone like this, you are much better off buying a phone that's a little bit newer. And the home button, even though it's an older design, my problem isn't necessarily with the home button. My problem is with the lack of gesture design. So with the iPhone 10 and like all the iPhones without home buttons, you use the gestures. It's a much faster and more fluid way of kind of going around your device. That is what I'd recommend using. With something like the iPhone, 10, it's a much better fluid system than something like the iPhone 6s Plus. So that's another big thing and kind of an annoying thing you're going to be getting with something like the iPhone 6s Plus. However, on the bottom, you're getting two ports. You're getting that Lightning port, which just got sunsetted with the USB-C port on the iPhone 15s, but you're also getting that headphone jack. Now the headphone jack this was the last iPhone to bring that headphone jack, technically unless you count the iPhone SE version. This was the last mainline iPhone, and that was something that was actually very insane. The fact that this particular iPhone, was the last one with the headphone jack, in and of itself is a very, very cool feature and a very insane thing to have. And that's not all. It actually was the first iPhone also to bring that Force Touch. So that 3D touch, this was also the first iPhone to bring that too. So there were lots of random first things that this iPhone brought that a lot of people would have probably forgotten. But the fact that this iPhone actually had that type of capability in and of itself, once again, is actually a very insane thing too. So, and that in and of itself is another pretty crazy thing going on for this particular iPhone. On the back side, you are essentially getting this full-on aluminum back. So it looks good, I like the way this thing looks and feels very, very awesome. You're getting that single camera setup on the top left, and then that's kind of it. Some things that this iPhone is lacking though that a lot of phones have nowadays. One, a glass back of some sort, definitely feels a lot more premium. You're not getting any wireless charging on this iPhone, which that in and of itself again can be a very, very annoying thing. The fact that we don't have any sort of wireless charging on this phone is very weird, to be honest, but it's understandable. But even back in 2015 when this iPhone came out, we had that type of capability all over the place. Another big thing though is that we are basically getting the lack of IP certification. Now apparently this iPhone did have some sort of water resistance, but it wasn't what you're thinking. It wasn't completely water resistant as you may think. So that can be another annoying thing going on for this particular iPhone too. But I will tell you, for the most part, it's a very good iPhone. I'm a fan of the way this iPhone has held up throughout the last couple of years. And there's a lot of things I love about this iPhone, but I would tell you the body of this thing in this day and age is a little bit more outdated than you'd think. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the camera quality, this is actually a pretty insane thing. So I will get it out of the way. It's definitely not that great of a camera. It's fairly outdated for the most part, like I mentioned before. But the interesting thing here is that with the iPhone 6s Plus, this was the first iPhone to bring a 12 megapixel camera, which a majority of iPhones since this iPhone's been out has, had that type of capability. But also, this iPhone was the first iPhone for the most part to bring 4K on the back. Now, it is 4K at 30, so it's not like 4K at 60 or anything, but that's still a pretty insane thing that this iPhone had that type of capability at that point. So it's actually a pretty decent camera on the backside. On the front, you can still film in 720p. And overall, this camera is a pretty outdated camera. Definitely it's grainy. It seems like a watered out type of camera, and it definitely doesn't look that great, but it's really not even that bad of a camera for how old this phone is. And I still feel like if you need to, you can take some decent photos from this thing for how old this phone is. But some things you're lacking nowadays is the lack of 4K 60 on the front and the back. This iPhone doesn't have it, and the lack of multiple cameras. This thing, zooming in and zooming out, is a fairly outdated system, and it just, with a single camera, there's only so much you can do. It's not that great of a camera on this type of phone, and that's just kind of what happens when you're getting an iPhone like this. So keep that in mind. It's not the end of the world or anything, but that's just one of the things that happens when you are getting an iPhone like this. So that right there is another thing, and probably another turn off for me personally for this type of device. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's just, again, one of those smaller things to keep in mind. Now, probably the biggest reason why I would not recommend buying this iPhone anymore is because this iPhone is almost 3 years behind in software updates. So this iPhone ended up lasting a much longer period of time than its predecessor, which was the iPhone 6 Plus. The 6 Plus ended off in iOS 12. This thing ended off in iOS 15. So this iPhone ended up getting several more software updates and software features than something like the iPhone 6 Plus, which was awesome. The problem that we're getting with something like the iPhone 6s Plus, though, is that we are years and years behind of this thing, this thing officially getting software support. So that is in and of itself one of the biggest reasons why I would not recommend purchasing this iPhone anymore, is because you're getting basically an outdated iPhone in terms of software. There's a lot of other things that are outdated with this iPhone too, but definitely from that software standpoint, that's essentially what's going on. And like I said, I wouldn't recommend buying an iPhone like this if you're already going to get an outdated version of software. So keep that in mind, and that in and of itself is another reason why I wouldn't recommend buying this iPhone. Now, performance-wise, this iPhone had that Apple A9 chip inside with 2 GB of RAM. Now, the internals might seem a little outdated, that's such an outdated old phone. But here's the thing, this was the first iPhone to bring 2 GB of RAM, and it actually brought twice the amount of RAM that the other iPhone had before it. How crazy is that this iPhone had that type of capability at that moment, that it actually brought twice the amount of basically the performance that the other iPhones had before. Now, this is what I'll tell you without a doubt. This is definitely an outdated performing iPhone. And more than anything, it's still gestures. The lack of gestures on this iPhone are just so outdated on this phone. It's just such an outdated type of, device in my opinion. Constantly clicking that home button just is so weird. And that can be a little bit of an annoying thing for some people out there too. But I would tell you, in my opinion, the iPhone 6s Plus, for what it was at that time, performance-wise, was actually not bad. And, if I'm going to compare it against an iPhone 15, it's going to be slower. Against the 14, it only holds up well against maybe an iPhone 7 Plus nowadays. Even the iPhone 8 Plus seems so much better in the performance side because it has been, it has been updated with software for the last couple of years. For the last couple of years. So that's another thing that kind of throws me off with this iPhone as well. And to be honest, I will definitely tell you, to sum it up, the iPhone 6s Plus is pretty much not worth buying at all anymore. It is an outdated iPhone. It is severely outdated. It's been outdated for a couple of years now, and I just wouldn't recommend purchasing this iPhone. There may be other iPhones that are kind of outdated I would recommend buying. An iPhone 10 is right in the middle if you want to go for it, but I probably wouldn't recommend it. Any iPhone on iOS 17 is fair game. So any iPhone there is still worth buying. So I would recommend buying an iPhone XR, XS, XS Max at the bare minimum, or a middle ground would probably be something like the iPhone 13s. I think those are very good iPhones, but I would not recommend buying an iPhone 6s Plus anymore. That's basically the main thing I can recommend. So that pretty much covers it up here. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.